Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to talk about recent updates in TB and non-tuberculous mycobacteria, especially in diagnostics and treatment. So there have been a lot of updates in TB and they keep on coming every 6 months to 1 year. And what we are going to discuss is what is new right now happening in late 2025 and early 2026. Now TB has come a long way. Earlier, when we were residents, we used to diagnose TB on the basis of a positive MAN2, child having fever for more than 2 weeks, cough for more than 2 weeks, and a contact with TB in the household. And that's how we used to start TB treatment. We rarely used to have a clinical diagnosis, a bacteriological confirmation. But now we've come a long way, and we now have a lot of tests, molecular tests that are available, through which we can make a bacteriological confirmation of TB. So which are the tests now that are available and what are we going to recommend? So let's look at the tests that are available. So you have the nucleic acid amplification test, that is the NAT assays, in which you have your Xpert TB RIF assay, that's your gene Xpert. Then you have an Xpert Ultra, which detects lesser bacterial load also. You have a TrueNat, which is an Indian-based NAT PCR done. You have line probe assays. Then you have the Xpert XDR panel that also looks at drug resistance to INH and fluoroquinolones and aminoglycosides. Obviously, the cultures have always stood the the test of time. And we have the MGIT cultures, the liquid medium cultures now available. And something that is going to happen in the future is whole genome sequencing and targeted NGS, which will come into clinical practice probably in a year or two. Now, out of the tests that are available right now, each have their own pros and cons, like your Xpert and Xpert Ultra and Xpert XDR is a completely automated system. You get results within 2 hours. So the question of contamination does not arise. It has its own problems and it has its own advantages. The problem with Ultra is that sometimes you could get a trace report which will be difficult to interpret whether this is rifampicin sensitive or rifampicin indeterminate results. So it will be difficult to make out DSTB or DRTB. The advantage of TrueNat that it's portable, so you can carry it with you. But it needs a dedicated laboratory staff. It's not completely automated and it's a semi-automatic system. So again, you need a staff that is trained in running the TrueNat. The MGIT cultures take a longer time to come. It takes around 3 weeks to get the first report and then final culture comes to you at the end of 6 weeks. So you may have a child on a regimen that may not be working for almost 6 weeks till you get a culture, and then you do a LPA on that, or you do a DST, the drugs phenotypic drug sensitivity test. The DST may take another 3 weeks. So with MGIT, you have the time that takes away all your picture. Genomic sequencing is going to be we are looking forward to, and this is going to change the way we treat TB. Because you will be looking at genomic and you will be getting an answer of what drug regimen you want to do right at the beginning. Now, apart from these various tests that are available, there are more samples that now you can take for pulmonary TB. Earlier, for pulmonary TB, we used to do a gastric lavage and probably a bronchoalveolar lavage if we had the facility at our center. But nowadays, we are looking more and more into, can we do less invasive tests, and what are the tests that are now available? So, as you know, expectorated sputum or induced sputum, very difficult to get in children because they usually would swallow the sputum. Gastric lavage, again, you need to put in a Ryle's tube, get the child to the hospital, empty stomach. So, it's not very nice experience for the child or for the parents. Nasopharyngeal aspirate is what the WHO has come out with recommendation. We have no experience of nasopharyngeal aspirate, but the diagnostic yield is not really that great. Bronchoalveolar lavage means an admission and going into the bronchus endoscopically and removing the fluid. Very high yield, but you will have to, the most invasive test. So we looked at stool. Stool is something where you could have the swallowed sputum and still the bacilli may be patent. And you could get it into the stool, and we looked at stool as a sample And this is our data. We looked at 52 children in which we compared the stool Xpert with either a BAL or a gastric lavage, and we found that stool Xpert was equivalent to a pulmonary Xpert in detecting TB less than 5 years. However, not really more than 5 years. So what you have to take with a pinch of salt is that stool Xpert alone may not be enough. It may increase the yield when you use it with a gastric lavage, and you could get a better yield of diagnosing TB bacteriologically. Now, this was about diagnosis of TB. Let's not forget latent TB. Latent TB is somewhere where we look at screening of the household contacts. So if I have a child right now with open TB, I would be screening all the household contacts to see if any one of them is having latent TB or active TB. And if they have latent TB, then we need to start them on prophylaxis. So earlier test that we used to do was Mantoux test. But Mantoux was very non-specific because it would give you a positive result even with BCG. And it could also give you a positive result with a non-tuberculous mycobacterium because the protein that you were using was a purified protein derivative which is present in all sorts of mycobacteria. Now there are new tests that are available which is very specific for mycobacterial tuberculosis. And which are those tests that we are going to use? So you have a PSI-TB skin test which is very similar to Mantoux. You inject the antigen through the tuberculin syringe intradermally and look for the delayed hypersensitivity reaction. However, the antigen that is used is specific. That's the ESAT6 and the CFP10, which your Mantoux test would not give. And you look at 5 millimeter induration after 48 hours. So this is a skin test. Right now, it is approved only in adults more than 18 years. And very soon, we will be having this test approved even for children, screening for children. Then you have the interferon gamma release assays, which are in vitro test. Same delayed hypersensitivity reaction, same antigens. But we look at the measurement of the interferon gamma from the T cells when you give these antigens to the blood. The advantage is the patient goes to the lab and they collect the blood sample and you get a report within 2 or 3 days. So it's not something that is done to the body. Now, among your interferon gamma release assays, you have which are various generations of these tests. Like you have a quantiferon test, TB-Gold, or a quantiferon TB-Gold Plus, and from the same company. And you wonder which one should you do. So let us look at the difference. A quantiferon Gold is a 3-tube test and a quantiferon TB-Gold Plus is a 4-tube test. So quantiferon TB-Gold stimulates only the CD4 T cells, whereas the Gold Plus stimulates both CD4 and CD8. So it helps to detect recent TB exposure better because of the CD8 response. So if you get a test positive, you don't know when the infection took place. So with the plus, you know it's a recent infection. So that's the advantage of doing a Gold Plus, but obviously the cost goes higher. Now if we look at treatment of TB, the treatment of TB has evolved from standard 4-drug regimen that we used to give for 6 months, where you had HRZE for 2 months of intensive phase and 4 months of HRE. So you used to remove the pyrazinamide. And now TB has evolved so much that you have drug-resistant TB, and the treatment of drug-resistant TB is absolutely different. So these are the national guidelines for drug-resistant TB, that is from the NTEP program. And there are various types of drug-resistant TB. So you have INH resistance, you have monoresistant that can be resistant to any of the first line, like you could just have a pyrazinamide resistance or just a streptomycin resistance. An MDR which is INH and rifampicin resistance. A pre-XDR is INH, rifampicin and a quinolone resistance. And an XDR is INH, rifampicin, a quinolone and any one of the other group A drugs, that is either bedaquiline or linezolid. So let us look at this grouping of drugs. You have a group A drug which includes bedaquiline, linezolid and a quinolone, either a levoflox or a moxiflox. So this forms your group A. Whenever you design a regimen for drug-resistant TB, you want all these 3 drugs in your schedule if possible. If not possible, you go to group B, you have clofazimine and cycloserine. Group C is ethambutol, delalamide, pyrazinamide, imipenem, meropenem, amikacin. So you devise a regimen which contains at least 5 drugs. And for the 5 drugs, bedaquiline, linezolid, clofazimine, levoflox should be in your regimen so that you could have a highly potent regimen for these patients. Now, a lot of regimens for DR-TB are available, and in Mumbai being the epicenter of TB in India, which regimen should we be using? So for MDR-TB in children above 14 years, you have a B-palm regimen which contains pretonimide and bedaquiline and linezolid and moxiflox. And if the patient cannot be fitted into the B-palm regimen, then you have a 9 to 11 month shorter oral regimen. And if that is not possible, then you would have to use a longer oral regimen based on the DST pattern. Now, this was in short, I could say it was kind of a reel of MDR-TB and latest updates in TB. We come to non-tuberculous mycobacteria. Why are we talking about non-tuberculous mycobacteria? Because this is something that we are now seeing quite often. And non-tuberculous mycobacteria can be divided into 2 types: slow growing, that takes more than 7 days to grow on culture, and rapid growers that grow within 7 days. So among your slow growing, you have your Mycobacterium avium complex, which we used to see a lot in HIV positive children, Mycobacterium canceri, and marinum. These are the main 3 ones. In the rapid growers, it's the abscessus and the fortuitum, which you would see usually in patients who have a chemotherapy patients who have central lines. So these are the rapid growers that you see. Now, what are the most common clinical features of NTM, and when do you suspect NTM? NTM can present as lymphadenopathy, cervical, usually in the anterior triangle, a unilateral lymph node, and the most common cause is Mycobacterium avium. As I said, you could have catheter-related infections, and the most common is fortuitum and abscesses. They can come as skin and soft tissue infections, of which you can have fortuitum, abscesses, marinum. Always ask for the history of putting the water into your hand or leg into the pond or into the gutter, and that gives you an idea. If you have dissemination, bone marrow involvement, you think of HIV and you think of Mycobacterium avium. Then you could have bronchiectasis with cystic fibrosis, and you could have an NTM there sitting, and it could be all of those rapid growers and the slow growers. And again, skeletal bone and joint infections, you could have the abscesses, the fortuitum, and the marinum. So when should you suspect NTM in pediatric? If you have a unilateral anterior triangle lymph node, single node, if it's not like a matted node, you have persistent pulmonary symptoms in children with cystic fibrosis not improving with antibiotics. There is a chronic skin and soft tissue infection. There's a disseminated infection in immunocompromised, and non-response to TB treatment. And especially don't forget, if your lab says AFB positive, MTB, PCR negative, it could be an NTM. So let's discuss this case, which was a little bit of a googly, where you had a clinical suspicion of NTM as well as MTB. So this 12-year-old girl presented to me in my clinic with nodular pea-sized swellings over the elbow, just at the supratrochlear level. And she had fever 20 days ago, and she was admitted in a hospital and had received IV medications in the right hand. There was no TB contact of fever currently, and there was no history of putting hand in the gutter. And on examination, there were these 3 supratrochlear nodes which were palpable, 1 centimeter into 1 centimeter. So somebody who had referred to me had done an ultrasound which showed osteomyelitis of the distal humerus and a necrotic supratrochlear node, suggestive of TB as well as an axillary node. Chest X-ray was normal. She had received cloxacillin for 7 days, but there was no improvement. An MRI of the right arm was done, and it showed the same findings. Lymph node biopsy was done. Gene Xpert was negative for TB, and histopath showed caseating granulomatous inflammation. MGIT culture was awaited. So the question here that came to us is, what should we treat this child? Should we treat this as Mycobacterium tuberculosis, or with that history of receiving IV medications for a fever and supratrochlear nodes as a presentation, should we think of NTM? So that was the question that remained, and this child was given HRZE, and Z was stopped after 2 months. Levoflox and clarithromycin were given in addition to to take care of an NTM if there was one. 4 months later, an MRI showed decrease in the size of the nodes, but now the pus had increased and there was no restriction of movement. So what should be done now? So she underwent a debridement, a pus culture, now grew an MTB on Xpert Ultra, which was RIF sensitive. She was already on the RIF sensitive regimen. She had taken HRZE. Her pus NTM was negative, so almost we ruled that out. And a pus MGIT culture after 6 weeks did not grow any organism. So what should be the line of treatment? Now, since the culture is negative and the gene expert is positive, it tells you that this is probably a dead bacillus, and the increase in the osteomyelitis may be a paradoxical reaction. And so we should not consider this as treatment failure or start second line. This child should only be continued on the same first line regimen. We did not give steroids to this patient because the paradoxical reaction was in the bones and we didn't want the bone healing to be affected. So we continued with just the first line regimen. However, we did do the TDM levels of her first line drugs and she had low levels, and then her isoniazid and rifampicin doses were increased. So I would just like to say that there are guidelines for everything that are available, but you will have to see the patient as a clinical whole and decide what's best for your patient. Similarly, then there are these issues in treatment of tuberculomas. I'm showing you this slide where we had a patient with tuberculoma for almost 3 years and you don't know when to stop therapy. So again, this is very much based on clinical and radiological decision. You decide on the basis of calcifications, perilesional edema, activity, as to how long you will have to give the anti-TB treatment. So I would like to conclude that TB can manifest in several ways, and MTB and NTM can be confusing clinically. So next time, whenever you see a patient and we are not sure, collect samples for both. Send an NTM PCR separately, collect an MTB Xpert or your TrueNat or whatever separately. And not all deterioration is clinical worsening. It could be a PUR. Thank you very much.